So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Josh Stoll. I could say a lot about this, but I tried to trim it. So let me just say that Josh grew up in Down East Maine. He's been a sternman, an oyster farmer, a Canals Fellow with the National Marine Fisheries Service. He made some academic stops along the way, Bates, Duke, New Maine, and Sweden. Now you're probably thinking Sweden, Oxford County, I've been there. Turns out there's another Sweden. I didn't even realize this, but that's Sweden. He doesn't just raise oysters. He and Christina Cameron, who gave a talk here not too long ago, was kind enough to bring their daughter Willa, hi Willa, are the parents of two wonderful children. Josh and Christina and a number of other great colleagues have been awarded a prestigious national research traineeship grant from the National Science Foundation focused on ecosystem science in the face of rapid ocean change. And in that work, they're going to draw upon diverse ways of knowing to grow, this is my language, collaborative capacities for solutions-oriented science and stewardship. One of the things that I was interested that Josh expressed even in the little bio or paragraph about his background is he said, or it says, his research is informed by real-world engagement with marine resource users, coastal community stakeholders, and policymakers. For this reason, much of his work is based in Maine, where opportunities for regular and ongoing collaboration is most possible. And I got to say that from the very beginning, as the Mitchell Center was being created, and a lot of us worked together to do that, we talked a lot about where to do this work. These sustainability issues are everywhere in the world, and we could have gone and worked on them in Africa, but we chose deliberately to start here, partly because we thought maybe we're not sure we know how to do this all that well, so why not practice in our own backyard in case we need practice. But it also reminded me of someone else who said something very similar to Josh, who was in this room back in the middle, and that was the Nobel Prize winner, Van Ostrom, who, when speaking to us, was talking about the importance of these deep relationships to build strong collaboration. And so in that sense, I think Josh's work is very much in keeping with what Van Ostrom and a lot of other amazing leaders, including Josh's advisor, Jim Wilson, helped us think about from day one. So please join me in welcoming Josh here today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, David. I really appreciate that introduction, and I feel privileged to be here in the Mitchell Center and at the University of Maine and on Marsh Island, which is unceded territory of the Penobscot people. David invited me here today to share some of the work that we've been doing over the last 50 years, working to strengthen and elevate seafood as part of the food system. And so that's what I'm going to be chatting with you about. I'm going to start with a brief sort of overview in a nutshell of what I'm going to talk about. And then we're gonna dive in. So I want to start with this observation that when you spend 15 years working on something, your perspectives change. And I'd like to think that that's pretty obvious. But today, what I'm going to share is the story of our ongoing journey to make space for seafood in the food system and how my own thinking about why it matters has changed. And I've underlined our because this is really a collective effort that many people have been involved in, including some of those of you who are in this room, but many others who are not here. And I wanted to acknowledge that a lot of my learning has been shaped by the collaborations and connections that I've made over many years now. So I've learned a lot of different things from this experience. Two of those I want to share with you. The first is salient to those who are in the room right now, and that is my experience is that people tend to stop paying attention during the presentation. So it's really, really important to get to your main point. And so my main point is this. Over the last 15 years, I've come to realize that vibrant community-based fisheries are and have the potential to contribute in a meaningful way to our food systems. And if we have those healthy food systems, those food systems are necessary to addressing a whole diverse array of structural inequalities. So I'm going to spend our time together to try to make that case. And to do that, I want to share with you this 15-year journey of building something called the Local Catch Network, starting with where we've been, then getting to where we are now, and then talking about where we're going. And I invite you not to sit back and relax, but spend the next hour with me being a strategic thought partner in this work and thinking about what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and how you might be able to contribute to this work, or how you are contributing to this work. So with that, that's my outline of my talk. You can stop paying attention if you're one of those who loses track after the first slide. So where have we been? As David said, I am originally from down east Maine and had the privilege of growing up in and around fishing communities and rural places. And in many ways, that personal experience has shaped my interest in this topic. And I'm going to fast forward. I wasn't born in 2009, as young as I look, but I want to fast forward to 2009, where this story starts. And at the time, I was particularly interested in this idea that we could use seafood and food systems as a platform to strengthen and build vibrant community-based fisheries. And for me, that was the objective, to use seafood as a platform to strengthening coastal communities and the fisheries that they depend on. And a lot of the impetus for that interest and that focus really came from this juxtaposition that I saw between how at a national level we were talking about fisheries and what I experienced and observed on the ground. And at the time I was working in eastern North Carolina in a place called Down East North Carolina. And to help sort of paint this picture, this is something called the Fish Stock Sustainability Index. And it's something that NOAA Fisheries is required to report to Congress on an annual basis. And I'm not going to get into the minutia of how they calculate that. It doesn't really matter for the point that I'm trying to make. But the key point is, as the score increases, the more successful, the more sustainable our fisheries are deemed. And this is the information that gets delivered to Congress on an annual basis. And if you look at this trend line, things are going up in a pretty good direction. And in some ways, if you take this at face value and sort of pat ourselves in the back and do a couple of these little handshakes and say, we're doing pretty well, we're on the right track. But my experience is that for many of those who participate in fisheries and who experience fisheries on the ground, the picture looks a whole lot different. This is a picture from down east North Carolina that I really like sharing with people because I think it captures many of the diverse challenges that coastal communities are experiencing: aging of the working waterfront, the decaying boats, the aging infrastructure. In the background, you have a giant McMansion, sort of this tension with people from away moving in to places. And this is more accurate of people's lived experience. And it represents this sort of tension between how we project the state of fisheries at a national level and the lived experience of those on the ground. Another way to illustrate this, this is also from Eastern North Carolina. This is a picture from the 1950s of a fleet of commercial fishing boats in Morehead City. This is what it looks like today. 100% transformation. And so at a macro scale, we might say, yes, fisheries are heading in a good direction, things are going well. But for many coastal communities, like those communities that I had the privilege of living in and around, that the story is quite a bit different. And so it's 2009, and I am a graduate student at Duke University and show up in this place called Down East. They didn't even know there was another Down East. And I was struck by the parallel in these rural places that have these strong ties to the environment, to the marine resources, and the similarities and challenges that these communities are facing. And I had the privilege of working with a diverse group of people, seafood harvesters, nonprofit organizations, local businesses, to design and launch a program called a community supported fishery based after the agriculture model, the CSA model, that linked consumers directly from boats to fork. And we had done some sort of pseudo research, some light research. We had sort of a sense that they would be interested in this work. And this is one of the moments in my life where I couldn't have been more wrong. There was interest, but the level of interest was absolutely transformative. And we had this experience where we created a little bit we went to the post office and got a post mailbox and a post box, and we had people mail checks in to participate in this program. And we thought we were aiming for 75 people to sign up for this program. And it was a couple hours from where this scene is taking place. And so it took a few days for those checks to start rolling in. And the first checks we got maybe 2 or 3 in the mail. And we were so excited. We thought, oh my goodness, 3 people want to participate in this program. We have made it. And then the next day, there was maybe 12 or 15. And we thought, oh my God, this might actually work. And then the next day, there's a little note in the mailbox that says, come see us. And there are 2 giant stacks of checks. There are so many people who signed up for this program that we had to return people's money. And it wasn't that people were specifically interested in local North Carolina seafood. It was that they were interested in making investment in their community. And they saw this as an opportunity to connect with their food systems, connect with their communities, and be part of something. And so just to dig into this a little bit more, one of the motivations of doing this work was to help harvesters, small scale harvesters, get a price premium to their catch. So to earn more through direct marketing when they seafood than they would when they sold directly to a processor or what they call down in North Carolina, a fish house. And so this is a little bit of data on the price premium. We ended up looking at these data 2 years into the program. And this is just an illustrative example over on the left-hand side of blue crab, which was one of the products that was part of this portfolio. And you can see on the bottom, the dark color is the price that harvesters were getting at the fish houses. And then at the top in the light gray, sorry, that the color contrast there, was the price that harvesters were able to get through the community supported situation. So you can see just kind of by eyeballing it, it's a substantial difference. We ended up doing that math and doing a weighted average based on product. And over the 2-year period, harvesters were able to get 33% more more income for their cattle. And one of the things that was really interesting and exciting about this work is we started down the track of we want to see if we can help harvesters make more for their money, make more for their catch. But very quickly, the work started to balloon into these larger initiatives around sort of structural change. And one of those um, uh, areas of interest was around working waterfront and the loss of working waterfront. That's a topic in Maine that has been front and center in some of the winter storms that we've had. And that was certainly the case in 2009 and 10 in North Carolina, where many of the fish houses had gone out of business and a lot of pressure from ex-urban development. And so we went through this initiative over a year-long process of going to visit different examples of working waterfront, and working with an architect and working with the town to start building out a vision for what an alternative fish house might look like. This is one example of the work that got underway. And so it wasn't just about how do people get, it ended up not just being about how do people make more money for their cats, but also it snowballed into this tool to address all kinds of community development initiatives. So that's one case in one place. And I can safely say it was all consuming for the time that I personally was engaged in this work. But probably the most powerful part of this work is that as this work gained traction, we've started to see examples in other places around similar initiatives in similar places. And through this work, we had the opportunity to connect with and learn from people all across the US, all across North America and beyond. We're saying, how do you do this in your community? And not simply how do you get North Carolina seafood in our community, but also how do you build these sort of models of innovation and I was really inspired by that work because one of the things that I learned very quickly was that I could share and we could share some from our experience, but we often learn much more from connecting with other people. And that became the starting point for the emergence of the local catch network, which was envisioned as a community of practice of people engaged in local and regional seafood marketing to learn from each other, to share ideas, to share challenges, and which then, and I will say that work has continued on. And as that work has continued on, one of the things that I have been learning is that maybe the end goal isn't simply about trying to use these models to support vibrant community-based fisheries, but maybe it's that vibrant community-based fisheries can contribute to healthy food systems, and that our end goal should be about healthy food systems. So to make that case, I'm going to zoom to 2020, bring you back to the start of the pandemic, and walk you through how we have been thinking about this within over the last few years. And to do that, I want you in your minds to go back the second week in March, the next week, 2020. And at the time, our network was plodding along and it was doing its thing. And I remember I was over in Libby Hall, where many of you are based. And I was walking back to my office, looking at then Twitter, and I saw a note that somebody posted that said the Boston Seafood Show was canceled. The Boston Seafood Show, for those of you who don't know, is the biggest seafood trade show in the world. And I thought, oh, dang, like, this is a big thing. And pretty quickly after that, classes closed. We all got ordered to go home. And I had this experience where I thought, wow, this is going to be really difficult for small scale community-based fisheries. And I had one of these moments where I said, um, it's been a good run. We've been at this for a while, but like it's done. And so I want to show you using Google Analytics, again, how wrong I was. So let me just orient you to this, this figure. This comes from Google Analytics. It's data on a weekly basis. So the columns are days of the week, starting with Sunday. And then time of day from 12 a.m. All the way through 24 hours. And the color represents when people are engaging with a website. In this case, the Local Catch Network website. And the brightness of the color represents how many people. And importantly, I want you to look at the scale. So this is, in this case, this week, 4 years ago, or no, whenever we are, I've lost track of time. At some point, 2020, we have this scale. And this is kind of pre-COVID in the US context. So this is kind of normal. So, you know, people are looking at it around 8 and 10 a.m. Why somebody is looking at it at 12 a.m., I don't know. Let's just acknowledge the time zones, things like that. But that's kind of that's the pre-pandemic crisis. And then we move into the second week of March, and we have something that I now affectionately refer to as the dark days of the Local Catch Network and of the internet. This is when we all went home and we said, what the world is ending maybe. And people weren't thinking about food at that moment. And you can see here, it went pretty dark. And this is the moment I referred to a minute ago when I thought, it's been a good run. Wow. And it's over. Now watch. You have a couple more days of darkness. And then notice the scale. It jumps up from 1 to 9 to 1 to 35. And put yourself back in that moment. What is going on? We're all at home. We're suddenly going to the grocery store. Things are missing from the shelves. There's no toilet paper. And suddenly, the work that we've been doing around connecting consumers to seafood goes from this cute niche thing to a recognition that food systems matter and local food systems really matter in a global crisis when it's all dumped up. Just keep watching. I have never been so wrong in my life. And this moment in time has been really transformative to the work that we've done in the Local Catch Network, where we've gone from doing work that is really on the sidelines from conversations to front and center. Now everyone, before this moment, when a reporter interviewed me and I said supply chain, they said, what? Now I think everyone in this room knows what a supply chain is and knows there can be fragile. And so this work has become really catalyzing for us in thinking about what we're doing. And I would offer that that healthy fisheries, therefore, are really important to healthy food systems. So as our work has evolved, we've really honed in on 3 areas of work. The first is on network building. The second is around technical assistance to communities. And the third is around complementary research so we understand these food systems better. I'm going to spend a little bit of time walking through some of the work that has emerged over the last few years. This is work that actually started pre-pandemic. and therefore changed. We had some funding to bring delegations of community-based fishers to international and national meetings to participate. This is a trip to Rome in November 2019. And we had this vision that part of elevating seafood as part of the food system was to have harvesters actually participate in these meetings where decisions were being made. And we made it through one, and then the pandemic happened and had to pivot in a pretty big way. But I think the pivot has been really, really exciting. And so here are some of the stuff that we have been doing, had done, and are doing. One of the big pivots we made is going from participating in meetings and travel to participating and hosting online forums and engaging in storytelling. And we have done that now in a few different ways. During the pandemic, we participated and partnered with a group at the University of Guelph to launch a podcast called Social Distancing. Really corny name, but a wonderful project where our colleagues spent a year doing repeated interviews and podcasts with members of the fishing industry about their experience as it evolved throughout the pandemic. And then building off of that, a postdoc in our lab, Caroline Ferguson, has launched a podcast called Surf and Turf, which focuses on the nexus between seafood systems, equity, and justice in the U.S. system. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to that podcast, which is ongoing, it's really exceptional. One of the core elements of the work that we do is bringing people together, and that has been through a series of summits that create space for people to share their experiences. The last one we did was in 2022 in Alaska. We had close to 200 people at these events. It's really sort of energizing, catalyzing spaces. As I mentioned, we also do technical assistance. That has played out in a few different ways. Lawton, who's in the back here, has been working with our team to launch an accelerator program for community-based seafood entities. And today there's two sort of threads of that work. There's a catalyst program that focuses on sort of business 101 type activities. And then we have a new mentorship program that pairs seafood businesses that are in this sort of local regional food system space with a set of people who have a lot of experience in the space. We've also invested a lot in helping communities get access to federal funding. I like to joke that as a professor, like my job is to apply for grants. But what it turns out, and often we apply for those grants like for our team, for our research team. But one of the most rewarding things that I've had the opportunity to do at the University of Maine and through the Local Cats Network is to work with communities to help them apply for grants, to bring in their own money to do this work. And over the last couple of years, we've helped 13 businesses get access, successfully get access to $6 million to do on the ground community engaged projects. And so while I love us getting grants, I even more love when community members are doing sort of on the ground work. And as part of that work, we've really targeted USDA's LAMP grant program, which is focused on strengthening local and regional food systems, but historically it's focused on terrestrial food systems. And our job is to say, don't forget about seafood as part of this. We've also had the opportunity to play a supportive role in working with organizations in other places to build out sister networks. Most recently, had the opportunity to collaborate with colleagues in the EU who are interested in building out sort of a parallel network some of that work got a little bit disrupted by the pandemic, but it's been really rewarding to say, we don't have to do this stuff by scratch. Like we built these infrastructures, have it, use it, learn from it, because the success of this type of work is not just our own collective success within the local catch network, but also helping catalyze similar efforts in other places. This work has also created the opportunity for us to think critically about policy initiatives and ask questions about how systems are created, the sort of policy initiatives that are created. And we've done that in different ways. We've done some work on seafood certifications and sort of their role in the space, as well as working with colleagues at Duke to think critically about this blue economy narrative, and to offer an alternative perspective, which we refer to as blue community. We've also used this as an opportunity to start building our research capacity. One of the things that's so interesting to me is there is at least a dozen centers across the country anchored at academic institutions that focus on small scale and community-based agriculture. To my knowledge, there are this many that focus on the seafood sector and community-based fisheries. And again, if we're thinking about the seafood as a key part of our food system, we should also understand what they look like. And as part of that, we've been doing work around simple things like describing the sector and what its current composition looks like. During the pandemic, we heard a lot about this sort of how people how consumers were interested in local and regional food systems. And this is one of my favorite projects that I've had the opportunity to work on, where we partnered with members of the Local Catch Network to use their Google Analytics data, where they just literally, in some cases, gave us their passwords to their login to say, I don't know how to do this. You go open up our account and find this data for us. And we used this information coupled with lots of different types of information to track what we were describing as this like pandemic bump that happened, where suddenly people were interested in seafood. And this is one figure from not that Google Analytics data, but from Google search terms. And what I like about Google search terms is it turns out that people are pretty honest with Google. And so what they put into their Google search terms allows you to actually see what people are Googling. And you can see here, this vertical dashed red line shows the beginning of the pandemic and how different search terms responded, or how people's use of groups, different search terms changed. And so you can see here, like words like local fish, you saw a bump. Seafood delivery, right? Like people are stuck at home, like they wanted to come to them. You also saw this kind of similar trends with words like local food, where there was a bump. But we never saw just general terms like seafood didn't experience that same thing. So people were like suddenly very interested in hyper local. And we've continued to do this kind of Google search term work through time as well. This has also led to what I would like to think of as some really transformative opportunities for collaboration to build baseline data about food systems in general. And the example that I'll point to is work that is really hot off the press and is being led by a postdoc in our lab, Tahir Advani, in partnership with NOAA Fisheries, USDA, and others. USDA has been collecting data on local and regional food systems since the 70s. And they have something called the Local Food Marketing Practices Survey, where they go out and they do this in-depth survey of the farming sector to say, what's going on? And that data has been a key catalyst to then take back to Congress and to other people to say, local and regional foods are worth investing in. Like, this is a legit sector that deserves attention and resources and has been used to help advocate for and support things like the local food marketing practices or LAMP grants that I mentioned before. The problem with those surveys is they don't include seafood. They don't include the marine sector. So we approached NOAA, we approached USDA to point that out. And through an ongoing and long process, we launched what we ended up calling the American Seafood Harvesters Marketing Practices Survey to begin to collect this data. That started with sending flyers out to 40,000 harvesters across the US. I can safely say, by multiple orders of magnitude, that's the largest survey that we've been part of before. And then we use that information to then roll out an in-depth survey. And so the fact sheets, one of those fact sheets is right here, are just starting to roll out. We're starting to share that information publicly. And so this is the first time ever that we've had this type of data around the seafood sector, which is so exciting. So over the last, moving since 2020, we've really leaned into our network as this space for network building, for technical assistance and research, with this idea that the goal maybe isn't about supporting vibrant community-based fisheries, but it's to use those vibrant community-based fisheries to strengthen our food system. So sort of this shifting goal in my own brain. Today, the Local Catch Network, which was established in 2011, has over 2,000 people who are participating into the greater orbit. It's a values-based network that has 10 core values, and it's anchored here at the University of Maine. So if you're part of the University of Maine and you're interested in this work, there's no excuse not to be part of it. In addition to that, we were really privileged to have the opportunity to work with the University of Maine to secure through the 2022 Congressional Appropriations Act funding to continue to catalyze this work, which focused on four elements: the network building, technical assistance and resources, transdisciplinary research, and supporting and facilitating training opportunities for graduate students. It really helped. This work has continued to gain momentum, and so excited to see congressional delegation interested in this type of work. So, talked about where we've been, where we are. I want to now talk a little bit about where we're going, with this idea that maybe the end goal isn't healthy food. And so the way that I'm framing it here is that over this last 15 years, I've personally gone from thinking about this work as focused on supporting vibrant community-based fisheries to realizing that vibrant community-based fisheries are a tool to contribute to healthy food systems. And as I continue to learn from many of those who are in this room and elsewhere, I also see it as necessary for addressing structural inequality in our system. And that's a big idea, and I'm not going to cover that fully, but I want to talk about where we are right now and where we're going. So to do that, I want to share a story from North Carolina that to me has really been motivating. This is a photo of a fisherman, Lynn Chestnut, who I had the opportunity to get to know and work with down in North Carolina many years ago. You can see the edge of his boat over on the right, and his daughter's tricycle. Well, he has a pretty cool horn on that boat, on that bike that I actually had never realized until just now. I share this picture because we were in the process of taking this initiative that we had launched and turning it into a fisherman's co-op, which still exists today. And he was one of the fishermen who had raised his hand to say, I see value in this. I want to be part of the board that helps guide this work. And he had a pretty severe injury where he hurt his back and was had to move inland for a little while. And we were in the middle of starting this co-op, and so I had to drive to the back of a tobacco field to a house where he was living. And I walk in and I see this person who has just experienced this physical trauma in this place with his young daughter. And I had this moment where I'd been working so hard on this initiative and feeling so proud of the progress and the like energy around it. And I had this moment of like, wow, we are not even scratching the surface of the challenges that people face in our world. And I took that with me and fast forward to a conference where I was actually in Maine, surrounded by a bunch of fisheries people, and I was sharing this experience, and a very prominent person who I have a lot of respect for looks at me right in the eyes and say, Josh, keep your blinders on. If you ever want to have an impact, stay focused. And I'm here to tell you that I think that advice is wrong. If we are serious about making an impact in the work that we do, we need to think about how these really complex issues are interconnected. And I see the work that we're doing as an opportunity to actually dig into this. And to make my case and to sort of talk about where I see us going, I want to share this this data from the US Census Bureau. This is food sufficiency for US households. It's a weekly survey that has been ongoing. I didn't update the data because I think it speaks for itself with even without the most up-to-date data. And I'll say this is just one form of inequality. There are so many, but I think it makes the point pretty clearly. What you have here is on the x-axis is the weeks of the survey that it's been conducted, and then on the y-axis you have the percentages broken down into blue is people with enough food, and basically everyone else is people who don't have enough food. And I just want to break that out. Week 45. Just looking at people who often don't have enough or sometimes don't have enough. This is just adults. It's 37 million people in our country right now. Just adults. We're not talking about kids. 37 million people. That's like 1 in 10 adults right now in the US don't have enough food, are struggling with some form of food insecurity. Going back to the story I shared with you, like if we're serious about change, if we're serious about thinking about the work that we're doing, we need to be thinking about these different issues in interconnected ways. And one of the ways that I've been thinking about it is around our capacity as a country. And I think you can look at this at lots of different scales, and we should be looking at it at lots of scales. The capacity for a country to produce enough seafood to meet our nutritional needs. And so this is work that a PhD student in our lab has been doing over the last year, looking at this idea of regional self-reliance, both at a regional scale and a national scale. And it builds off of this statistic, this 90% statistic that many of you have probably heard. And that statistic is that 90% of the seafood that we eat in this country is imported. If you hear that number, you see a lot of shaking heads, so many of you I think have, that is such a disempowering number.
it's so easy to say, well, we don't have any seafood here. We get it from elsewhere. Like, it has nothing to do with our food system. Well, it turns out that we need to rethink that number in a pretty big way. And so I'm not going to get into this figure. There's a lot going on here. Basically, on the right are different regions of the country and regional self-reliance. On the left is the national level. But the what I do want you to pay attention to is this black line. And so these different colors are different product types and broken out by finfish and other species and shellfish. But this is kind of the take-home method. And if you look at these percentages for time, you look at the amount of species that as a country we produce, you calculate things like yield, and you remove species that are currently used for bait and other things. What you end up at is that we currently produce enough seafood to meet 75% of our demand. And that's without innovation from a technology perspective, without aquaculture, without better utilization of our seafood. That's a big freaking difference, right? And so we actually could be using a lot more of our seafood to address things like, I would posit for this group, like food security that exists in our country. So how are we going to get there? That's a good question. And I think there are a lot of different ways. One of the ways that we have proposed to do that is through the creation of a regional food center that helps scale up the network building, the technical assistance, and the resources available to communities to empower and strengthen local and regional food systems. And the vision for that builds off of this 15 years of capacity building and aims to support the prosperity, the resilience, and the well-being of communities. So a model that we put together, thinking about how that would work, and leverages many partners, many of whom we've been working for a long time, and many who we haven't. But I'll end with this. We spent 6 months building this idea that comes out of 15 years. And we submitted this proposal to the US Department of Agriculture. And they didn't even put the proposal out for review. They rejected it. They rejected it because they said seafood is only one product, and we want to support seafood. So I end with this thought. I think we've made a tremendous amount of progress in the work that we're doing, and invite you all to be part of it. But there's a lot of work to be done where the agency, the food agency in our country, doesn't even recognize the seafood as part of it. So with that, I think it was a 4-hour talk, so have a few moments. Just want to say thank you and look forward to having a conversation.
Great, great. First, can we all give another hand to Josh for this just filled with information talk that makes us all, I think, want to just follow him around for days and learn and learn and learn. So thank you so much for this opportunity to see how you can take ideas that people don't see how they need to come together and what is involved in bringing them together to really make a difference. This talk really hit on so many points about collective effort, about local food systems and the way they matter, what makes sense, what doesn't, how to make space for our seafood in our food systems. And it's just revealing that those in charge of thinking about food didn't want to fund some of this. So we got some work to do. So So one of the questions, since we're doing this at a university and you've given us such a great sense of how we need to work together, what departments do you see as important at a university? If it's going to be not just isolated, but it's going to bring together health, education, economics. Tell us a little bit about who you think needs to be at the table.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really wonderful question. I like to think about universities as malls where you can kind of go down the aisle and be like, oh, we need an engineer. Oh, we need a this, we need a that. And I think that's one of the really special things that being at an institution that's our scale, that we can do that. I can walk into the engineering building and say, hey, we're hearing from people in our network that they have this technical issue, and somebody's willing to take this meeting and engage in it. And I would say, like, it's less about which departments, and I think all departments have a role to play everywhere, from the humanities and the arts to the technical sciences like engineering to computer sciences. So I would say there is really space in this type of work for all disciplines, and it's a wonderful way to do interdisciplinary and collaborative work.
Oh, very interesting, very interesting. So you helped us at the beginning in about talking a little bit about growing up in Down East Maine. And one of the things that I think people are really interested in is this question of how does our experience in terms of where we grow up make a difference? And how do we bring those people along, and how do we grow with them? Any thoughts about that?
So many thoughts on that. Yeah, it's a complicated question because I am both from Down East, and I'm also recognize that I am not from Down East. And I think this has always been something that I have it's been a challenge for me. I am both not from the Wabanaki people, but also not a multi-generational fishing community. And both of those sets of people have incredibly deep and rich histories in these places. But I also grew up and got enough bug bites behind my ears that I have, that's sort of a metaphor, but I have an intense connection to the place that also makes me really appreciative of and feel connected to the landscape and the communities. And I think I've tried to take that sense of reverence and respect for the people from these places with me through my work, whether it's in Maine or in other places. And I have never come at this work from the perspective that I know what is right, or like our work is right, but working with people to learn together. So I think it's less about trying to bring people along and more about trying to build meaningful relationships with people wherever you have them.
Hey, Linda, can I squeeze in at least
You
one
bet.
question here?
You bet.
For your friend?
Hi, thank you for your talk. I was interested in the idea of CSA style model for fisheries, and especially kind of how the issues that show up in CSAs show up in fisheries. For example, I had many friends who worked for the local CSA farm where I lived prior to this in Iowa, and to them, the community supported part of community supported agriculture was a punchline because it wasn't the local community who was buying it, because the local community couldn't afford the CSA. I think it was like 60 or 65% of people who contributed to it drove more than 45 minutes to pick it up. So I was interested if we're seeing local communities being the buyers of this, or if this is people who live further inland who want that fresh seafood and maybe are affluent enough to access it.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good points and ideas bundled in what you just said. I think my own thinking on what local means has evolved over the last 15 years, and to me, it's really shifted towards relation rather than a geographic measure. Like, can you have a relationship between those who consume the product and those who are harvesting it? And I think that expands what it means to be local from a geographic mile perspective. To get at what I think is like a really interesting and hard question around like, well, who gets to eat it? Is this just product for wealthy people? I think many people in the seafood space who are in doing this work right now are grappling with those same questions. My colleague Hillary Smith and I are doing a set of focus groups right now with people who are working to strengthen local and regional seafood systems. And one of the things that has been interesting in this conversation is there are people really pushing back to say seafood cannot just be for rich people. Like, we are trying to break that model, and there's some really amazing models out there. I wouldn't say they're the best, but there's really interesting models. There's a program in Philadelphia called Fishadelphia. Fish people like puns, so sorry about that. But that their main focus is to connect harvesters to inner city. It started around schools, but they're doing really interesting, empowering work in that space. The pandemic has really, I think, brought greater awareness in the fishing community to issues of food security. So there's some really cool models in that space too that aren't CSAs, but around tapping seafood into the food security space. So if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to hear that.
One of the biggest compliments I can offer about this talk and this conversation is I was so wrapped up in thinking about that question in your response that I totally forgot that we're supposed to stop at 4 o'clock. But then I came to my senses. So I better draw things to a close for people in the room. And if you want to come up, I'm hoping Josh maybe can connect with you in some way. And if you're in the chat space and you want to connect with Josh later on, we can help you with that too. So let's take one more chance to thank Josh for